Good morning and welcome to NeoConnect 2020. NeoConnect is NeoCon's online series of resources, programming, and events held throughout the month of June. I'm Monica DiBartolo, NeoCon's Program Director, and I want to thank you for joining us. Today's session is approved for 1 CEU credit for interior designers and 1 LU credit for architects. It is also being recorded so you can access it on demand. Please refer to your screen for more details. Today's session is titled, Hospitality's Next Breakthrough is the Workplace. This session will present a new trend in design, driven by a younger generation seeking experiences that align with their values and individuality. From restaurants and hotels to healthcare spaces and workplaces, the hospitality industry has influenced the way we design for the end user. Our panel will discuss what can be done to meet new challenges in demographics, mobility, and technology. Our 3 industry experts include Justin Martix, the Executive Director, Head of Global Workplace at JP Morgan Chase & Company in New York. Justin is responsible for guiding the firm's office designs and workspace innovation agenda. Prior to joining the financial services firm, Justin was an integral member of the strategy team for well-known design firms including Ted Moodis Associates, Gensler, and DEGW. Over the years, Justin has worked for a diverse set of companies such as Citigroup, MasterCard, NBC, PepsiCo, and Siemens, as well as institutions such as the GSA and Federal Reserve Bank. Shay Lamb is a managing executive and studio creative director at TPG Architecture in New York. Shay leads a variety of projects within TPG's growing hospitality practice that work to redefine and optimize the expectations of the guest experience. Shay brings nearly 20 years of experience in interior design and architecture, art, graphic design, and project management to the leadership team. A specialist in hospitality, Shay focuses his practices on authentic placemaking and enhancing the guest experience. And our third speaker is Suzette Subance Ferrier. Suzette is a managing executive and studio creative director for TPG Architecture in New York. Suzette has more than 20 years of experience as a designer and professional. She has been responsible for the successful design and completion of some of TPG's most prestigious projects, including Time Inc.'s Innovation Studio, The Foundry. And she was named Contract Magazine's 2017 Designer of the Year. Suzette is a frequent featured speaker at industry events, including NeoCon East. And now I'm delighted to turn the program over to Suzette Subance Ferrier.
Hi, Monica. Thank you so much for having us today. This is a really wonderful opportunity and we're very excited. One of the great things I will say that NeoConnect has done is really connect us as an industry, and I thank you so much for doing that. So today we'll be talking about hospitality in the workplace. So Justin?
Hello.
And Shay and so Shay, do you want to kick us off on a little bit about hospitality?
Sorry, sorry, little technology glitch here. Technology is wonderful when it works, and when it doesn't, but what I think is really interesting about hospitality is that we are at NeoConnect right now and talking about hospitality. So what's great is that it's managed to reinvent itself over the years and sort of elbow its way into other market sectors, including retail, healthcare, and obviously workplace. So what the hospitality has done is proven that it's important, as most human beings are social beings. And so hospitality is really about human connections. It's about care, it's about storytelling, well-being, And it's about humanizing safety as a part of the guest experience. So most of these ideas are fairly intangible. It's about creating a feeling and an atmosphere, a sense of belonging that is beyond the physical. It's emotional. So as it applies to hospitality within the workplace, it is about prioritizing well-being and humanizing that experience for as a part of the return, especially now as a part of return to the workplace.
I think, I mean, one of the things, in thinking about this and as we get into the dialogue here, hospitality as a concept and the workplace borrowing from that, a lot of the things that we see in hotels and restaurants and that idea of curating experience, of connecting to people as a brand, about being authentic, about thinking about service and all those things. I think as the world evolves and people's expectations change, I think we see just all of this mattering more and the things blending in a way that we've frankly never seen before. We've seen touches of it, and it would maybe be in your cafe pantry, or it might be in your welcome or a concierge space. But I think really when you talk about it being kind of the next big breakthrough, it's where it's touching every facet of the workplace. Even, I mean, we talk about things like the accessories or whatnot that we put in our restrooms that make it sort of just sort of either surprise or delight people and make them feel welcome and cared for.
Yeah, I think it's also, following up on that, just the human connection. It's, again, having that human connection with the employees or the staff. And that's what's been great. And clients, our clients and employers are seeing that that's so important. Just really connecting with people on multiple levels. It's not just about one thing at their desk, but it might be that experience from their, just at their, at their phone or at their desk, or even how they walk into the office. So just a little bit about workplace. As designers, as workplace designers, we've always seen the workplace as the physical manifestation of the brand. People, culture, it was the place that all three came together. And we really relied on this physical space to define it. And today we're seeing that the culture and the people in the workplace, it's now a lot bigger than that. It's about really enforcing that culture. So it's no longer just about physical space, but it's also about the virtual space.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's the injection of the hospitality touch points that elevates that the workplace. I mean, it's really as you said, it's creating authentic human connections, curated touch points that reinforces the brand. And reinforces the culture and puts your people at the heart of the equation. And it could be anything. I mean, it's food choices, receptions, full service. Justin mentioned all of the amenities within the bathrooms. I mean, that all goes to sort of reinforce the authenticity of your brand. And now more than ever, clear, concise messaging is critical to the success of any workplace environment.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's important to note, and when we have conversations around this, because you could be talking to executives or whatnot, and they say, well, really is all of this fluff, right? Like, what is all of this? And you begin to say,
yeah.
Hey, there are value to it. And I think what's interesting is looking further back. I know sort of workplace assessment is a big thing now. It has been for a long time, and I remember when I was back at TPG, wrote some of the first workplace surveys to really try to measure the impact of the workplace on people. In the hospitality business, they've been measuring these things for decades and decades around, we're talking about the idea of understanding the impact of physical design features on people's experience, on revenue generation, on sort of how hard you're driving your assets. Like the example I often give people, right, is that there's a science to how you design a great restaurant, and that people who sit in booths are known to stay longer, order a second bottle of wine, and typically order dessert more often than people who sit at a four-top table, right? And so you see people like, you know, there's a reason why there are booths, and there's a reason why people covet booth and ask for a booth, right? So, you know, there's these things, and I think we begin to see that in the workplace, where these sort of touch points where, you know, it can be difficult to kind of always draw it back to productivity or, you know, attraction, retention. But I think intuitively we begin to say, like, these things really do matter, and is part of the strategy of you know, we try to drive efficiency in the portfolio and things wherever we can, but at the same time, we want to always give back these things. And these are the things that we think people actually really value, our experience, right?
Yeah, and so, you know, from a design standpoint, I'm always fascinated of how you can have you know, a hotel brand, and how no matter what hotel you go of that chain around the world, you still feel like you're a part of that brand. And it's not always a copycat of one brand to the one design to the next. It's the intrinsic feeling you get in, whether it's that door pull, whether it's the scent that's in the air. And, you know, for a global brand like yours, like Justin, is, you know, having that kind of feeling no matter where your clients and your employees are going in, right? It's just always having that feeling that I am in a JP Morgan space, and it's that service. And I think in the end, it's always about the service, whether it's the service that we are giving our external clients or even the internal clients. And I think that was kind of interesting, that the conversation has changed from not just about staff, employees, but it's almost like that internal client. And that was a conversation that was really happening in design. It wasn't about, you know, oh, this is the back of house, this is this. It's like, you know, what's that client experience? And I think that's also helping us with leveling the playing field, that everyone has that same experience.
Yeah, I think even you talk about, right, clients and that kind of stuff, where we would say, right, you walk into one of our client centers and there actually is sort of like there is a signature scent, there is the bathroom amenities, you know, but even those touches of, you know, there are candies, but it's always sort of local candies, or it's, you know, and I think we even think about, and it sort of stem from all those sort of personal touches. And we even thought about that, right, in terms of how we, I know we'll get into some more of this, but like how we think about design and how you experience the brand, but have it be authentic to the location. I think a lot of companies, ours included, for a long time, are very much about sort of a workplace program that sort of stamped out a specific kind of design and aesthetic and whatnot. And I think the challenge is that those things, you know, if you sort of keep doing that, think about a hotel brand where, like, you know, it's pumping out the same product, it's not fresh, it's not contextual to the location. You don't know that you're in Hong Kong or that you're in, you know, London. It sort of loses its, you know, and I think in the hospitality world, you've seen very much, you know, that brands have had to kind of figure out how to balance that. What, you know, what are you experiencing in that location, and what are you experiencing from the brand, and how does it come together? And we thought about that, you know, very much in all of the locations that we've been designing now and over the past couple of years, and plan to in the future. And it actually makes it more fun. We're letting designers design, right? We're letting them come up with concept and think about, you know, what's sort of special and what's the thing that makes Palo Alto sort of so cool and different than, you know, what's happening in you know, Austin. So it's you know, it's an exciting time to think about all this, and it's an interesting time because we're fundamentally thinking about how work will change in the future and how the workplace will change, right?
Yeah, I think it's about that regionalism and authenticity, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we're allowing, you know, the design to convey a high level of care from Suzette, from the employees to our clients. And it's, you know, we talked about this not being a new thing, but it's something that's been happening over time, but it's now really at the front and center and at the core of almost everything that we do.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll share some projects that we've been, you know, completed projects that really employ some of these concepts. This is a BSC Global, and it was a project that we completed for Brooklyn Sports Entertainment. They are a hospitality brand, and this is their workplace. And they wanted to really create a workplace that evoked that hospitality feel, that really, when you walked into their reception, which is the photo on the left, really brought in that flavor and also reflected Brooklyn. We did incorporate a bar there in the reception area, as well as a swag shop. BSC also owns the Brooklyn Nets, as well as the Barclays Center and other venues across the country, and they are a global brand at this point. So it was really important, and for them, it wasn't just about their outside clientele coming in, because they do have a lot of, you know, ownerships of other teams coming in, other venue owners coming in, but also for their people. And they wanted to create a space that really worked that way. And so, you know, it was really important to have that first impression, and the flavor went throughout the space. It wasn't just about having it in one spot. It was about really infusing the entire space with the brand. And, you know, the idea was doing it in a way that's thoughtful, as well as have a wide variety of touch points.
And so, and this is, you know, actually a space that TPG, you know, did for us as part of our, believe it or not, this is actually a swing space, as we decided, but, you know, part of what we're doing right now. So we're actually going through a very sort of big, long project of building a new headquarters in New York. And it's actually the most challenging part of it is we are building it exactly where our existing or old headquarters was. So we had to move about 7,000 people out of the building into several adjacent buildings, and really understanding that, you know, in order to take down the building, which is over probably the largest, it is the largest controlled demolition ever undertaken in the world, where it's being taken down piece by piece. And we'll be going back up. It's about a 5-year process. So, right, we needed to put people into, and, you know, business needs to continue to thrive and function. You put people into, you know, space, and had to make a nice space, but, you know, not our forever space, right? And but we had sort of these special moments that we wanted to do things, and frankly, because it was a sort of seen as existing for a certain period of time, I was able to take certain liberties in terms of our thinking around things, and frankly, you know, pushed a lot of this, the hospitality type stuff into what we were doing. And so an example of what you're seeing here, this is actually, this is a blended space. It's a conference center floor, but it combines employee amenity with conferencing space and client-facing space in ways that we normally wouldn't do, but actually tend to be quite separate, right? And so you're seeing here, this is sort of a Starbucks, you know, it's that people can go to and grab a coffee, but this space and it sort of functions all day, but it also gets cleared out and hosts cocktail parties here. We then, you know, like it's outside of an NPR, which this can serve as a breakout area. So I think we really had to think about how do we create these sort of hardworking spaces that do a lot of things, but still try to keep it fun, keep it beautiful, you know, and I think really, I think surprised people, because there was so much angst around sort of coming out of the existing building about the business being split up, and, you know, to really create these environments that you know, the feedback's been great. And you know, like I was saying before, it's not just about what happens in the cafe pantry or the conferencing or the lobby and whatnot. I think, you know, as you see on the next page, really tried to introduce those things, you know, into the workplace. And again, you know, sort of this is sort of simple, not necessarily over-designed space, but we thought about, you know, I you know, draw cues from, you think about like the Soho House or the, you know, some of the great hotels, you know, in New York or around the world, where there's all these sort of little areas, and it's not that you put a big label on it and say, this is what you do here, this is only quiet area, this is whatever. The space should kind of tell you, like, and you should kind of gravitate towards what you feel, you know, is an option that you would like. It takes people a lot of time to get used to. Some people really love it. Some people told me they hate it. There's people in between. But it's, you know, I think we're experimenting, just like a great hotel brand or restaurant. You have to.
Yeah, I think that was what was really interesting about the project, was the experimentation, but also the concept of choice. One of the things that, Justin, you were a champion for was just the choice, like giving the people who are using the space choice of where they want to sit, how they are using the space, and even down to being able to rotate their desks and untethering those desks from the spline. Like, I think there was so many principles, and what was great was this project, even from the highest up level at JP Morgan Chase, was saying, this is our chance to test out new concepts. And I think that was really, as a designer on this, that was like, whoa, these guys actually want to test out like different concepts.
Well, yeah, and give yourself permission to fail in some cases, right? And I think, as we said, we're going to try a lot of things, and part of how we know that we tried enough things is that some things will have not worked, right? Because if everything worked, then I would have said, like, we didn't experiment enough, right? We didn't push it, hard enough, right? And you know, I think, but similarly, you know, to talk about hospitality, I think measurement and understanding the utilization, the impact of these things, you know, I think, and that's something where you look at, you know, in the hospitality business, underutilized assets are identified and redeployed or reorganized or rethought, right? You're not going to continue to run a restaurant that nobody goes to and nobody makes, right? Like if you're operating. So I think part of that too is we've said, you know, a lot of that idea that you build a workplace floor and you walk away and people just use it for the next 5 or 10 years exactly as it is, that's really not possible if you're trying to create more diverse environments, right?
Yeah.
You know, talk about choice. So this is my Cali Realty Corporation, and we've been working with them for many years. And what they've done is they've taken a strong, hard look at the portfolio, and they took out actual rentable square feet in prime locations in order to infuse amenities within all of their campuses, knowing that, you know, creating an environment where their tenants, they can attract and retain their tenants. The tenants are proud to bring in their guests and clients, was really, and creating amenities where that allows for a high retention within their tenants' employees were critical elements to a successful business. So this is a food hall that we converted on the ground floor, and you know, it allows their tenants and to keep all of their employees within the campus, and that increases their culture. So from a business model, they started to move in this direction where all of their campuses now currently have, you know, well, fitness centers are kind of sort of going away. I'm sorry that we put some in, but you know, the food and beverage components are a critical element to the success of their campuses, and it's spaces like this that really drive up their sort of bottom line and their revenue.
Yeah, I think you're gonna see more of that in a lot of the suburban campuses, because you don't, you know, employers or people who are signing leases are gonna look for amenities for their people.
Yeah, and now that you know, we've proven, and we're going to get to this in a second, that we've proven we can almost work almost from anywhere. This idea of the headquarters in, you know, New York or in San Francisco or Chicago might be going away. So these suburban campuses are going to be really, you know, the future potentially. So, this is another one of our clients, and you know what they did. This is Mechanism, and they're an advertising agency. They wanted a vibrant, interactive office with amenities right at the reception. And so, you know, the image on the left, there, that's a full working bar. So it's almost as if when they greet their guests and clients, they can say, "Hey, do you want a coffee? Do you want a cocktail, or do you want water?" So choice, to Justin's point, is really critical in all of these aspects, and it is true to the core of what hospitality means.
Cocktails is a key part of hospitality.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard something which I thought is absolutely true. Alcohol breaks down all barriers.
Yeah, and to our next slide, apparently COVID hates alcohol. So.
So you know, many of those projects were obviously completed pre-COVID, and here we are today. We're in a distributed work model. It's no longer about that physical one workplace. It's about these multiple workplaces that are happening across the globe. Right now, even though we have countries opening up and cities and states opening up, we're really at almost like still like about 90% working remotely. So what does that mean? It's really about the culture and really trying to keep that culture to keep the people together. And we understand that things are evolving and they will continue to evolve. And it's really up to companies to evolve with it and look at their people and how they can keep their people engaged. Because right now we're at one point where, you know, people are just trying to keep their jobs. They're looking at how can I work as efficiently as possible, but the conversations continue to evolve and your people are your greatest asset. So keeping them engaged and keeping that culture out there is really important, and it is a huge challenge at this time for every company.
And I think, you know, as we talk about this a lot, and we frankly talk about it all day, every day, it seems, as we begin to think about how we return people to the workplace, how we you know, build new workplaces. You know, we have something like 50,000 seats in flight of projects, of things that are being either built or conceived or whatnot, and really thinking about these impacts. And the truth is, you know, no one really knows definitively. And I think that's hard for all of us because we're all being asked every day, what should we do? How do we react? What will this mean? Will people never go back to work? Will workplace mean something different? And I think we can begin to say, I think it will be something different, and this does accelerate us in a way. But as far as that idea of, you know, hard to imagine a world where workplace doesn't play some sort of role in organization and culture. I think, you know, you use the example, people said, you know, after 9/11, no one would ever want to work in tall buildings again, right? Or like, and look at what, like in the city that I live in, we have more new tall buildings than ever. And I think, but so much has fundamentally changed, right? And I think sometimes people, you can almost disassociate and you kind of forget, like, why is it that we have building security like this, or the bollards, or all these things that really kind of protect us and make us safe in tall buildings exist and are just part of daily life now. And I think it's interesting. I think, you know, things will inevitably change. And I think in some cases it'll be hard to remember why this thing changed in the office, the workplace, a lot of it stemming from where we're at right now. But I think the most important thing is to sort of, not to take sort of pause and understand this moment and try to respond as opposed to react, right? Because I think, you know, and I think, but that whole idea of like what it will mean is, I think, you know, this idea that people, and it will become more of it, what you were talking about before, yet another choice that people make about where and how they work and what they do and how they spend their day and how they're most productive. For some people, like, home is a terrible place to live, right? And they can't wait to get back to the office. Some people are saying, hey, this is actually really great. Or, you know, so it means a lot of different things, at least that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that this pandemic has taught us is how much we rely on each other, just as a culture, as a society. And it's, you know, everyone touches each other's lives, like in one way or the next. So I think that concept has really taught me, you know, the idea of leading with empathy. And leading with empathy is that idea of giving people choice and saying, hey, you know, maybe your kid is not going into school this week, or, you know, or is it better for you to be working at home on this item? Or if that person requests it, that's part of the conversation. It's about a two-way street. It's no longer a one-way mandate, because today I think employers are going to have a challenge to say to people, I need you in the office. I need you everyone 100% in the office. It's not a part of the conversation anymore, because we've proven that we can work remotely. So I think that's going to be something to think about. But, you know, for me, it's been a lot of this conversation of leading with empathy, which really talks to what are you expecting from people, how their well-being. Like every conversation we have, every email we exchange is, how are you doing today? Are you okay? Because we're all checking in on each other's health and well-being. And it's become part of our language, and I just hope it continues personally. And you know, but I think the workplace isn't going anywhere.
Well, that's it. I see, you know, I see a question here from Jordan. It was interesting. It was sort of asking about change management and kind of like, you know, and the culture shift is, you know, is it driven by design, right? Is the chicken or the egg? Is it sort of workplace, you know, sort of driving the change, or people driving the change and workplace responding? And I think it's, you know, this is sort of an interesting point of inflection to kind of contemplate those things, because I think sometimes very much with certain types of work and functions and people, we are trying to catch up to how they're working. Like I think about agile software developers or whatnot, or where they're driving changes, where some of the more traditional functions, we may be pulling them, you know, out of like out of the offices and into the new ways of working and whatnot. And I think with this sort of great equalizer of putting everybody, like everybody having to be remote and sort of connect in this way and have it sort of the exact same work experience, has kind of begun to sort of see from a change management perspective. I'm very interested in to see, because some people are saying, oh, what's our work from home strategy in the future? What's this? And I've been going to say, I think people are, the behaviors are going to begin to express themselves, and they're going to be in some ways just what they are, because I don't think you're telling people what to do or if they have to go to an office in the future. I think there many more of those decisions are going to be made by the person themselves, right? And so I think it's an interesting time to think about change management, because I mean, like,
well, you know, it's kind of interesting, you know, just even working on your project, this concept of almost you design to 90%, and that 10% might be the user interaction and how that user is either changing it, or if there's a post-occupancy engagement where you can leave yourself a little bit of fluff to make some modifications. I think it's planning with that, you know, concept of agility and flexibility is like so important, especially like today moving forward. And, you know, we are working on new projects and existing projects, and we're talking to our clients, like, you know, the concept of flexibility and agility. But I think one of the biggest things, just before we fix, is about employee retention, right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, as we talked about like a location strategy, and you begin to say, you know, I think, you know, we sort of talked about suburban markets versus urban markets versus, you know, relating it back to sort of hospitality, you think about the network or the mesh of kind of things that people use in the world, whether it's a restaurant or a Starbucks, or, you know, a hotel or a lobby, or some other, you know, thing that that people kind of use, you know, throughout their days or their lives or their work. You know, I think thinking of the workplace in that way, where, you know, we even talked about the idea of like, you know, could we leverage branches to provide community workspaces where people, you know, convenient to their homes, could go and work and connect with other people and find the focus that they need that maybe doesn't exist at home, but not have to commute into, you know, spend a whole bunch of time commuting, or when it's really just not necessary, but yet they could come and you know, come into the workplace or major workplace when they need to. But what they would experience would be maybe very different. Maybe it's more of an airline lounge like concept where you're, you know, you're using the space, but it's not the typical workspace and you're not assigned to it. And you know, but that idea of kind of meeting people with different products, even like you look at like a hotel brand, it's like the portfolio of products that they deliver that really sort of meet different people's needs at a different time. Like sometimes you want that luxury experience and you need all the bells and whistles, and sometimes you just want a place to crash, right? And it's sometimes you're meeting with clients and you want to impress them and you need to entertain, and other times you just like, you need to get on some video calls, right? And you don't need all that, right? So I think beginning to think of, you know, that the commercially, you know, workplaces, you know, something that people use in that way is going to be, you know, and I don't know if it happens overnight, but I think that's sort of the direction we're probably heading.
Yeah, and I think it's also about the experience for the end user who are using these different sites, so that they have that, again, seamless type of experience, and that if no matter where you are working, you're all on that level playing field. And I think one of the great discoveries, like during this, like working from home, is that you have that meeting equality. You know, you go to, it doesn't matter where you are in location wise, but you're all on the same, you're all the same, right? It's equality of across the board.
You're not in a satellite office or, you know, a regional office.
Well, yeah, oh yeah, that you're sort of, yeah. And I think what's interesting, and it's sort of, you know, we talked about it too, the idea that like we talk about shared economy, right? Like, and we talk about the Uber and the this and that, and it's like made me realize that it's like hospitality brands were probably like they were part of the shared economy way earlier than anybody sort of even had a word for it. But that idea that like you go dine somewhere and you don't own that space, but you go there and you have an experience. And I think what we've done in the workplace is we've said, okay, well, we're all about for a while we've been all about the sharing of the space. And the leveraging of it, because we know it's not utilized all the time. So that things like authenticity and whatnot. But then we hadn't really maybe focused on the experience. You know, like you don't get to you go into work and then you sort of say, give your give the Uber driver 5 stars or 1 star or whatever. It's like you don't get to do that with your workspace, right? And I think we actually talked about that idea.
Please don't give anybody any ideas.
Yeah, no, that's the thing in hospitality. There has to be a feedback loop, and there has to be sort of accountability for experience. And I think we've even talked about that, where like does the workplace app like that we have, like after you have a meeting, you could say like, do you rate your meeting? And if you give it 1 star, you'd be like, okay, well, it's going to be, well, apparently there's the mouse in the room. Someone took the batteries out of it and just left it there, or there's no, all the dry erase markers are dried out, or so it's like that the elements of just, and frankly, if you're servicing a space properly, those things are taken care of. And I even talked about the idea of, treating a workplace, especially if it's a shared, kind of experience, as something that has to be highly serviced, and that idea that like you wouldn't go if you went into you want to see the chairs tucked into underneath the conference room table each night. You want to see all the papers cleared off. You want to, especially now in a post-COVID world, you want to know that surface was cleaned and scrubbed. And it may even be like we joke about like the when they used to put the thing over the toilet bowl in the hotel room so you knew it was clean, or they come in
corners at the
and they make like like something happened. They said like, how do you indicate to people in that same way? Or now I see where the hotel brands are putting a seal on the doors. Like, how do we tell someone that this space has been disinfected and clean? And even to think about again, always drawing that connection to hospitality. Like that's been a thing for forever. As I'm remember we talked like I when I was in grad school at Cornell, I took classes at the hotel school, which was interesting. They actually had very specific design sort of things around hotels, around like, can you get a vacuum into that corner? Like, how do you clean it? Like, how do you make environments that are, and I think, in the workplace, sometimes you look at the cleaning protocol even, and it's someone walking around with a duster and maybe like they vacuum if they ever. So I think we're contemplating all of that stuff, and frankly, like constantly looking to what happens in hospitals, obviously, is like that's sort of taken into one extreme, but but in all these, in restaurants and hotels and civic environments where you just
I think like the idea of like also the metrics, like you were saying before with hospitality, like, because resources are very tight right now, it's how do you leverage every single remote site or every workplace, and making sure you're doing that, so you're using you're economizing, right?
And you're creating amenities that directly impact the health and well-being of your guests, of your staff, of your people. And when real estate is the #1 cost for you, your people are the second #1 cost for you, but your people should be at the #1 focus for any sort of company. So keeping staff engaged and healthy is critical, and infusing hospitality in order to do it. I mean, some of the things, biophilia, food and beverage. I mean, I know, Suzette, when you're working for some of your clients, we're always trying to look at places where we're putting food and beverage components dispersed throughout the floor. I mean, and that comes directly from a hospitality model. I mean, if you go into any hotel lounge, hotel lobby, I should say, now they all look alike. I mean, from hotels to corporate interiors, you know, you're never further than 50 feet where you can either order a drink, get a menu, or be able to consume some sort of product, which is, you know, that's hospitality.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's interesting because a lot of people were talking about, you know, during the COVID time, like, oh, are we going to have food? Are we going to have cups? So what are we? And you still need to provide the amenities for the people. Why? Because you need to, one, entice them to come back to the space. And once they're in your space, you want to keep them safe. So they're not going in and out and going to the Starbucks or going to restaurants just because you want to be able to provide more of a full service model, right? That's kind of like what I'm thinking. And, you know, the food is a part of that wellness. And it's also, you know, maybe it's become single serving as opposed to, you know, where we were doing were larger cafes, and looking at certain protocols, but it's not about not providing. I think that at the very, very beginning, there were people like, oh, we're not going to use our coffee machines. We're not going to have the refrigerators. And it's like, okay, hold on. No one's coming back to the office if there's no coffee. Just saying.
We might get rid of the salad bar, but
right, exactly.
You're not getting rid of coffee. I don't see how, you do.
But it's funny. That was like, you know, that was the kind of conversations you're having with people. You're like, you know, you still have humans that are coming into the office.
You've got humans that are coming into the office, and it's really about choice and control. I mean, you know, there are ways that one can get a safe cup of coffee. You know, maybe the buffet bars in corporate interiors and in all interiors are going to go away, but there's no reason why single serving, you know, coffee cups and food offerings can't be provided for all of your employees. So absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, so one of the things we had on this page, I think too, like the idea of community management, and this is, you know, something that, you know, beginning to kind of think about the things that have come out of co-working that maybe are relevant, you know, more broadly. And, you know, I think that and this whole idea of even just like when people, so if people are coming into the office sort of on a more purpose-driven kind of way, right? They're coming in for a reason as opposed to just coming because that's what they do and they have to. You know, that idea of actually, you know, providing the support that people need, I think is going to be really important. And two, we talked about that, and, you know, kind of almost relates back to like some of the things around event design, where you think about your party or your you know, having a wedding or whatever it is, like, you know, and you actually have like, you know, you have an event planner, you have a production staff, you have all these things. You begin to say, okay, well, if teams are coming together and, you know, it's more that like we're coming together for a purpose, and we're actually probably spending a more concise but more intensive kind of experience together, whether it's like co-creating something or spending half a day or a full day in a workshop together, and then sort of going back and you know, almost, you know, use the term offsites, but I think we may begin to see that where it's like groups of people are come together for very, you know, sort of specific and focused things. There may be a way that you'd actually say like, all right, someone needs to like design that engagement. Like what is the right room setup for you? What tools and things you need, writable surfaces you need, like, and you would actually sort of curate your space or whatnot in a way similar to like you know, an event or production design. Say like, you know, this is a, you know, this is a convention, this is a, you know, this is a dinner, this is a whatever, but it's, you know, and we actually, I mean, we frankly do that a lot. Like we run some very, you know, sort of sophisticated conference centers, you know, with amazing food offerings and event design, everything, but it's much more about sort of the client experience or the special event or, you know, the product launch, as opposed to kind of like the day-to-day stuff that people do. And I think you may begin to see that kind of trickle down into, you know, when people come to work, they need that kind of service, right?
Yeah, definitely. Because, you know, you need to, if you're going with more of a flex schedule or flex desks, you need someone who's going to really help manage where are people sitting, how are people coming through or circulating through the space, how many meetings are happening at a time. And I think that's going to be something that, you know, traditionally, you know, if for larger corporations might be more of a facilities management, smaller ones like that, or even office management, but it's going to put a little bit more strain on it, because in order to keep people safe, you really need to do that. And using technology, like with the choice and control, you can do that. Like, I think we're going to see a lot more about smart buildings and smart systems being incorporated. Just the idea of being able to book your room with your technology, all that seamlessly through an app or a phone, is going to be the way, because you don't want people circulating as much through the space. You probably want them to be a bit more direct on where they're going to.
Great.
And, you know, and I think, you know, building on that, it's just this idea of, you know, how are you servicing the people, whether it's your clients, internal clients, and then the external, like what's their experience in this space?
So it looks like we've got about 15 minutes left. I'm trying to think, and it looks like we got some questions. I don't know if
So we can go to the Q&A. Let's see.
I think, you know, I think it's an interesting discussion, especially, you know, in sort of the time that we're in, you know, but I think these are things we were thinking about before, and I think they're things we're going to continue to think about. And maybe, you know, like I said before, and things will change, and sometimes we maybe would forget why, but.
Yeah. So there was a question about millennials. 60% millennials will be taking majority of the workforce place by 2030 and 2035, and how is workplace going to evolve? That's a big question. However, I think before COVID, and we're hearing, is that millennials always been looking for choice. They're definitely the generation that likes to work a little bit more autonomously. So if anything, it's increasing this concept of choice and being able to work from anywhere. Is something that we've been hearing that millennials been pushing for a long time. I think the big question is, what's Gen Z going to do? Gen Z was really looking for that physical space that they can go to find stability. And so I think you have the millennials who are starting to have families, who might be wanting to do more of this remote work, but then you have the Gen Zs who are coming up, who need the mentorship and still need a place to go to. So, you know, that's something that's evolving, but something to keep your eye on is really because they're going to actually outpace millennials.
What's interesting, I saw there's some data coming out of the Cushman-Wakefield survey that they did around 50,000 people, you know, working remotely who are normally office workers. And it was interesting to see some of the demographics things that they were saying, right? That you know, it actually tends to be, you know, sort of younger generations that are having more of a struggle, and with this, it actually tends to be because of their homework situation, potentially, you know, roommates,
Yeah.
small parents, living with parents still, and it also can be very much about like sort of that career development and that engagement, right? Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're sort of, are you present? Are you there? Are you learning and absorbing? You know, and so, but you know, I think as part of their survey, they also found that those are the people who sort of view and see part of this shift in a more distributed way of working as being a permanent part of the way that they work.
Mm-hmm.
And accepting of that, but you know, and also the other bit was really about like boomers being the executives and the decision makers who kind of set policy around this stuff, and maybe why you've seen it not sort of progress the way you think it would have really kind of taken a shift in their mindset around acceptance of all of this. So I think the question of generation is always an interesting one.
Yeah.
I never want to group people together and say you all behave one way because you're generation, but you know, I think it does. You know,
I think that's where choice comes in, right? It's really about choice. So we have something about programming techniques, digging into all staff levels. How do you handle resistance? One of the things that I know at TPG we've been doing a lot of is employee surveys and polling. That's something that's really been helping us to inform our designs for our clients. And it's one of those services that more and more clients are engaging with. And it's not, you know, what does an employee survey do? It helps you get that feedback loop so you can understand what people are looking for. And in today's market, that is so important. I can't emphasize how important it is, because it's hard to get the buzz or the feel of a company when you're not in that physical space. So creating a feedback loop so that organizations can hear what people are thinking and they can pivot. I think right now what we're all learning is that we have to be agile and be able to pivot. So that would be one of the programming techniques I would recommend to any organization at this time.
And I think I see a question here from Sabah. It says, what is the first thing you consider when designing the workplace? And I think, to your point, I think traditional programming, frankly, just used to really like get in there and, you know, down to the nitty gritty. And I think much more now we try to think about what is the function or the type of work that's happening in this place, and then how do we maybe see that evolving? And I know you used the example before about agile software developers. They're constantly changing. Like, you know, I talked to them like this year, and how they say they do agile is different than how they said they did it last year or the year before. So I said, but flexibility is key, right? Like, I think even the creating space, even into there was a question here about from Catherine about will the COVID design effects last far into the future, and the answer is I don't know. But what I've even begun to say, density has to be a variable. We don't decide the density of our workplace and set it and forget it, and it is what it is forever. Because we've seen that where we've done the bench testing and whatnot. We can't set people, you know, necessarily at full capacity and be compliant with like a social distancing strategy. But if you make all that stuff movable and detachable and redeployable, it becomes very easy. You go in over a weekend and you move some stuff around, right? So I think flexibility is like all of a sudden is something we talked about, and I think it's now kind of going and saying like, what is really flexible and what isn't, right?
Yeah, I think also technology, we were starting to see that incorporation of seamless technology, and now it's called frictionless technology, right? So you're not, and so I think technology is just going to keep growing. You know, when you think about it, I guess it was like 15 years ago when they talked about, you know, the Internet of Things, and it just, you know, and then you have Alexa, and it's just going to keep building. So I think technology is something that's becoming more and more important, and it's just going to keep growing. And in terms of, I also think of technology and how are we going to connect people who are virtual to the physical people who are in the office, the people who are physically in the office to the people who might be still working remotely. I think that's one of the challenges that we're going to see in the post-COVID world, is keep creating that as a seamless experience. Yeah,
I see an interesting one here from Sherry. It says, you know, the COVID concierge concept. I had not thought of this one. You know, creating a new role for someone to help staff integrate back into the office, or they're following protocols, et cetera, monitoring, coaching, consoling employees. That's very, I mean, that whole idea of even just the hospitality aspect of this, I mean, I've not heard of that, but I think you're onto something.
Yeah, and that's part of that community management. What's interesting is in New York City, one of the mandates by the state is you have to you have to, one, make sure that everyone's self-monitoring, but also be able to track if they do become infected. So it's kind of almost a mandate from from a state and code point of view of being able to keep track. So maybe that's also part of what that concierge is doing, you know.
So we have quite a few questions here. Sorry, and Darcel, you asked a lot of questions. And we have to pick one or two. I would say, you know, it's interesting sort of looking at the amenities. I think one kind of interesting question I think you had, that maybe this idea of, and I don't know what some of these acronyms are, JEDI and BIPOC, do you guys, but this idea of community engagement, of actually, you know, sort of thinking about hospitality spaces, and you know, that's been a big thing that we've been talking about, whether it's in the branch network or in other places, is how do we actually make our spaces usable and accessible to the community, and engage people and actually, you know, help, you know, whether it's having the farmers market, like, you know, hosting the farmers market in one of our spaces or parking lots, or you know, letting a community group or doing seminars on financial literacy, or having, the Girl Scouts come and, you know, I think that's something that's interesting. You think about the hospitality component of that. You know, hospitality by nature is welcoming people in, right? It's not meant to, it shouldn't be exclusive. Yeah,
so I think a lot of these questions, you know, is about like that health and well-being, And we were seeing that and LEAD has been taking off and has been a part of our vocabulary as designers since it really was launched. And it's continuing to be that way. And it's not going away. So definitely LEAD and WELL, because now WELL is incorporating a lot of the concepts that we're learning about now in the post-COVID or in the COVID world, right? Because we're still here. And so I think there's gonna be a huge emphasis on employee well-being, which is really thinking about not only on the, how they feel in the office, but their medical status, how they, feeling even when they're at home. So I think that's something it's even beyond that rating. It's much bigger than that.
Yeah. So I see.
It's not even just, don't let it be incumbent on the LEAD and WELL and rules and regulations to tell you what you should be doing. If your company and your people are telling you, you listening to your companies and your people is the most important thing. If they're uncomfortable, it's about their health and well-being. So lead and follow at the same time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There are two questions I think are almost related about ways of doing social responsible social engagements, as well as, and it's about really connecting with people. So when they are working from home, whether it's virtual town halls, whether it's doing smaller sessions where you're connecting back to your studios, groups, those are things that I think we can be doing, and I hope companies are doing today to keep their employees engaged. And I think that's something we can do now. When we go back into the office, I mean, when you're having larger groups, you're hoping at that point we have a vaccine and we can socially be together. But I think we always have to be cognizant, even when we are all healthier, that there might be some people at home. So you always have to keep that virtual engagement. And it's not just about everyone standing around in a town hall. It's going to be doing some more of these, and maybe it's just seeing more faces.
So I see Darcel actually got back to us, and JEDI means Justice, Engagement, Diversity, Inclusion, and BIP is BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So thank you. I'm terrible at acronyms to begin with. I can't even remember my own company, but I think this is an interesting topic, and we discussed in the group. Sort of more broadly is, I think, the relationship between what's happened, with the pandemic and sort of the sort of social consciousness and other things that have followed, and how it all kind of comes together. And I think it made me think about things in the workplace that maybe you hadn't thought of. And of course, we talk about like people belonging and feeling included and creating a workplace that really does that. And you think, okay, well, how does the physical design of that, do? And there's sort of the obvious things around, making spaces accessible, right? Or making, I'm trying to think of the other examples we use, like gender neutral restrooms. Like we say every floor, in every building that we build now, we put in gender neutral restrooms, right? But I think other things we talked about, like, like the corner office or the head of the table, and like who sits there? And like, do they look like me? Has anybody like me ever been there? If I'm,
yeah.
And I think we've begun to think about that in terms of, and I'm, drawing that, draw it back to hospitality. I think, I don't know, but it's sort of, there is sort of, you think about hospitality environments, there isn't really hierarchy to it generally. I mean, I guess maybe there's a VIP room, or there's like the presidential suite, but I think that idea of just sort of like these equalizing experiences and creating spaces for everyone and engaging the community, it's so important, and it's something I'm really care a lot about. And I think people are really sort of waking up to that.
Yeah, and I think it's also like there's no longer a back of house. We need to treat each other as equals across the board, and that takes place. Everything from the mailroom to the executive lounge. It's not saying that they're the same finishes, but they're designed in a very thoughtful way, and everyone is engaged. And so, I'm going to go back to the employee survey. It's a way of hearing the people, right? It's a way of people hearing everyone's voice and being able to design things that are thoughtful and that are appropriate. And leading with empathy. I think if we all treat each other as equals, we will come out of this as a better society.
Well, looks like
Okay,
we're
cool.
up on time. There's still some questions. Sorry we didn't answer them all. Maybe we could type some answers. And but yeah, someone is asking about coffee culture. I hope coffee culture comes back. Iced coffee. I'm an iced coffee guy.
Those are the things that would bring people back to the office. You can't take away everything. I think the takeaway from this is you got to have the amenities. People want to come back, and you got to give them a reason to come back too.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Monica, for having us. This was really fun.
Justin and Shay and Suzette, thank you so much for that very engaging and inspirational presentation. We really appreciate that you joined us today and that you shared your expertise with us. And thank you to everyone who also joined us today. Please be sure to NeoConnect with us next week with our webinar series as it continues with the creative provider. Have a great weekend and be well, everyone. Thank you.
Be well.
Be well. Thank you.